everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well. This is Series 2, Episode 4, and I'm delighted to have with us today the visual artist Cecilia Danell. We'll go straight down to Mayo, I think, to say hello to Cecilia. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi, how you doing? Yeah, I'm in North Mayo in Ballycastle.
That's a residency?
It's a residency I'm doing for a month at the Ballinglen Arts Foundation. So I'm on week 3 of the residency now, so it's really great.
Have you been there before?
No, it's my first time actually. So yeah, it's really nice to get to discover the area, and the centre is great. So yeah.
Good. Okay, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. But just by way of introduction, and I love this story, you came over to Ireland with your mum on a holiday when you were 19 years of age and fell in love with Galway and sent your mother packing back to Sweden.
So, yeah, no, actually I went on holidays here twice with my mum. So it would have been when I was 17, 18, and then I moved here when I turned 19. So, but around teenage years, and I was really interested in Irish traditional music at the time, and I borrowed books on Ireland and really wanted to come here. And it was just kind of like a special interest I had. I just kind of just really wanted to travel around and discover Ireland. So like myself and my mum just hired a car and kind of went around looking at different towns and places, and yeah, I just really liked the West Coast, and I can identify that there was an art college there. So I was like, I kind of wanted to study abroad anyway. So I kind of thought, look, I'll just apply to Galway and see if I get in. And I did. So it was quite random. I didn't do loads of research into colleges or anything like that. I just thought Galway was nice, and there was a college there, and that's where I ended up going. But I think being 19 and being away from home, for a long period of time for the first time in my life, I really didn't think that I was going to stick it out for the full 4 years. When you're that age, 4 years feels like a really long time. So I kind of thought maybe I'll do like a year or two and see how I get on, and maybe transfer back to Sweden if it doesn't work out, or this kind of thing. But the time really flew, and I mean, I'm here 17 years later. So yeah.
I love it. No regrets.
No.
And tell us about your home place in Sweden, Motala, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Motala. It's basically, it's in the kind of middle of the country. There's a long lake there called Lake Vättern. And if you draw a line between Stockholm and Gothenburg, it's kind of right in between them. So kind of equal distance. Yeah, it's a small town. I grew up on a horse farm a few miles outside the town. So it was a really kind of idyllic kind of place surrounded by woodlands, and my dad worked as a carpenter, but my mum and dad had horses then as well. They were doing harness racing with trotting horses as a hobby. So we grew up with horses and sheep and chickens and rabbits and stuff like that. So it was quite idyllic, yeah.
So obviously the sort of forest background to your farm and all that had a big influence to this day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I see myself returning to in my art. I go back there and I do research, and I just feel that particular landscape really kind of imprinted itself on me in some ways. I kind of see myself identifying very closely with the kind of forested landscape and that location, or the kind of Scandinavian landscape overall. So even though I lived in Ireland for a long time, my work is mainly based around that particular landscape. So yeah.
So how often would you go back?
I go back every Christmas. So I'll be going back in a few weeks' time now again. But yeah, usually I go back once or twice a year. But when I do go back for a bit longer. So last year I was there for almost 2 months, around December, January, and before that I was there for about a month as well. So it's I kind of spend a little bit longer just to have time to kind of work over there as well, because there is a studio space that I can use in the barn. So when I'm over there, I can kind of do research and do certain painting or studies or things when I'm over there as well. So it's just I kind of want to have a chunk of time when I go so that I can really kind of utilize the time there.
And tell me, this is obviously your inspiration. How do you record it? Do you use film? Do you use notebooks or sketchbooks or anything?
I have an SLR camera that I bring with me. It's quite a compact, kind of good one that isn't too heavy. So I can usually kind of set myself up with, a map, a camera, my rucksack, something to eat, flask of coffee, and then I set off for a few hours. Yeah, so I go off for a few hours into the woods then, and just kind of have a kind of vague idea where I'm going, but then I kind of let myself kind of discover things as I go along. And so I do these kind of research trips when I'm over there, and then I kind of bring the research material back to the studio. So when I paint, then I work from printouts of photographs, but I deliberately print them quite small, just so that I don't get too kind of bogged down with detail and stuff like that. And I have this kind of perception of myself being in the space as well. So it's kind of like a merging of referring to, you know, research photographs and notes that I take as well. And I used to draw up maps and stuff like that. So every time I paint, I know exactly what it felt like when I was there, what the weather was like. And that all kind of influences the painting as well.
And when you sort of stage something like that, do you add to it, or is it very much what you're looking at?
So all the places I paint exist, but
Yes.
I'm not too bound by, you know, exact details or anything like that. So I kind of like, I introduce all these kind of arbitrary kind of drips and colors and stuff into it as well. And, you know, I kind of start off with a research photo, but then eventually I kind of remove myself more and more from it. And it's more important to me how the kind of painting hangs together rather than being too literal, you know?
Yeah. Okay. And you worked quite a large size, I gather.
I do, yeah. No, I really love working large because I love the kind of the physicality of, you know, like large gestures and being able to kind of go into kind of small details and kind of almost like abstracting parts and stuff like that. So yeah, no, if I ever work small, it tends to be kind of zoomed in sections of the landscape. I don't make like tiny scenes, if you know what I mean, because it's a complete different way of painting. And also because I use the kind of acrylic drips that I paint within and stuff like that. Like the drips would have a certain velocity, so they're always going to be around the same width. So if I'd made those drips like on a small painting, they would just look huge, you know, whereas if I have a big canvas, I can have more leeway to kind of play around with surfaces and textures and stuff like that.
And you use some incredible colors, I mean, really, really interesting colors and combinations, which we'll see later on.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned acrylic there, but I think you mainly use oils, is it?
I do.
You're using acrylic for underpainting, are you?
Yeah. So the way that I work, I mean, when you read kind of footnotes about my paintings, it always says like oil and acrylic on canvas. But I mean, the acrylic is like an underpainting, so all the actual strong colors would all be oils. So I kind of build up the canvas in layers, and I think originally years ago that would have been a way for me to not be intimidated by the canvas. You know, if you have a big, huge blank canvas and it can just feel very intimidating, you know, you feel like you have to do something really good with it or something. So I just started like years ago, kind of just, you know, having, you know, thin layers of acrylic that I was building up. I would start with maybe kind of dark, kind of purpley colors, and then do kind of thin washes over it. And sometimes it would be like a colored ground. It could be like, you know, pink or blue or something, or other times it's more like a kind of pale, kind of foggy type of color. But that kind of brings me, it kind of makes me familiar with the canvas before I start painting. So then I'm not intimidated by it. I've already kind of tackled it. And then I would kind of draw up the image very loosely with charcoal. So like I never use, say like projections or grid systems or anything like that. I know some artists do, but for me, it's not really that important with exact accuracy. It's more, you know, to lay out the image. And then I use a kind of dark, kind of drippy acrylic where I put different mediums into it. And that kind of just, you know, I let it drip in certain parts and I fill in certain parts. So that becomes kind of like a framework then that I can paint onto with oils, and I retain certain drips then and paint within them, and then other things I paint over. But that way I have kind of like a very kind of vague outline of the image that I can then tackle with oil paint. So yeah, that would be the acrylic part.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your practice in terms of, you know, are you an early morning person, or, you know, do you spend one day a week going out, you know, looking at forests and stuff like that? You know, how does the whole thing come together?
So I am not a morning person at all. I get
except for Saturday morning today.
I get to the studio around 10 usually, sometimes earlier depending how busy I am, but usually around 10. And I make coffee and I kind of do a bit of admin and stuff like that in the morning. So my best painting time, I suppose, is through the afternoon. That's when I kind of really get into my stride, and usually between maybe 3 and 6 or something in the afternoon, evening would be kind of my best time. But yeah, and when I do get into painting, I kind of have to stick with it for like quite a few hours, because I paint sections kind of wet on wet, which means that if I'm kind of working with a certain area in the painting, I have to kind of resolve it before it dries if I want a certain you know, texture or brush strokes to be evident in it. So that means that if I kind of start working, if I have something that I need to do later that day, like say like an appointment or I'm meeting someone or something, that can completely throw me off, because I need to kind of have that headspace once I'm starting with something like that, so that I can just kind of keep going for hours. So that's why sometimes I can end up making a large painting. It can happen quite quickly, but that is because I spend like a lot of time, you know, big chunks of time over a number of days. And also because I paint wet on wet in different sections, and one section is dry and I can usually work on a different section, which means that I don't always need to leave the canvas to dry in between. I can work on a different part.
And would you always work on one piece at a time, or could you assemble?
Generally, I have this kind of thing that when I'm working with a painting, I kind of have this like that I feel that I'm in that space, because I remember when I was there and took the picture and I engaged with the site. So I kind of used to kind of follow a painting from beginning to end usually. I don't really like kind of working on multiple things, because for me it's kind of like I'm in that particular space, and then I kind of sign off on that painting, and then I'm in the next space. And I kind of step into it because it's so large. It's like I'm actually in that painting when I'm working. So
yeah. Tell me, Cecilia, what would you consider to be the highlight of your career to date? You know, is there anything that stands out in your memory as, ooh, you know, I've made it. This is great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. I suppose, you know, early on in my career, like I would have finished college back in 2008. So like in 2011, I got something called the Wexford Arts Centre Emergence Award. And for me, that was a huge deal at the time, because it gave me like funding to make a body of work for a year. And it also gave me like a solo show in the Wexford Arts Centre in both galleries. And that was my first Arts Centre show at the time. So that was like a huge boost, because up until that point, I had just kind of taken part in like local group shows around Galway and stuff like that. And it had always been, you know, you'd make 1 or 2 pieces per show. And at the time I felt I hadn't been able to work as large as I wanted to. And part of that had been a funding issue. So when I got that money, I just felt like I just completely just immersed myself and make like a series of very large paintings. And I made like a Super 8 film. And I think that just completely just boosted me as a painter as well, that I had that chance.
Can you explain what a Super 8 film is?
Yes, a Super 8 would be, you know, pre-video, people would have shot these kind of home movies on Super 8. Like it's a very thin film strip, so it would be quite, you know, quite a small film image. So you get a certain kind of texture in it that I find is quite interesting. And the reason I would have worked with Super 8 in the past is because it's almost like painting in a sense, because you're editing the film by hand. You can kind of scrape onto it, you can do different things. So it's a very physical medium.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I really enjoy working with that. The only thing with Super 8 is that, and nowadays it's very, very expensive to work with. So like, you know, you have a 3-minute film, and with developing and buying the film stock and everything, you're talking like over €100 per 3 minutes. So you know, you need funding for these things. But I would have worked with Super 8 a few times in the past. So that would have been one big kind of turning point in my career, I suppose. After that, then I would have worked. I did a residency in Norway back in 2016 in a place called the Nordic Artist Centre, and that was really amazing as well. It was funded by the Norwegian Ministry of Culture, and they put us up in these huge studios on a mountainside for 2 months, and that work then it resulted in 2 solo shows, one in the Galway Arts Centre and one in the Dock in Carrick-on-Shannon. And it also resulted in the first book on my work at the time. The show was called The Last Wilderness. So that was like a big deal as well, that I got to do this international residency that then resulted in 2 exhibitions. And I got like an Arts Centre project, an Arts Council project award at the time as well. So that meant that I could make very ambitious kind of installation work and another film, and do the book as well. So that then would have resulted in me being selected for the RHA Futures in 2018. And then after that, then I got representation by Kevin Kavanagh Gallery in Dublin, who I'm with at the you know, from now, you know, since then basically. So after that, then I would have had 2 exhibitions in Kevin Kavanagh Gallery. I've had an exhibition in the Ashford Gallery and the RHA as well. But you know, there's always these kind of things, you know, through your career that kind of feel like turning points. So 2 major in the, you know, the Wexford show back in 12, or you know, the residency in 16, that then led on to these other things. So
and then you got a residency in the Cultural Centre in Paris, the Irish Cultural Centre.
I did, yeah, that was great as well.
It was just pre-lockdown.
It was literally just
literally.
Yeah, it was January, February last year. So but it feels like ages ago. Yeah, 20 last year. But yeah, no, that was really brilliant as well, because I hadn't been to Paris before, and I just got to go to all these, you know, really, really great art collections and museums and stuff, and see all you know, all your heroes kind of up close.
Yes.
Which was one of the main reasons I wanted to go, because, you know, as a painter in the west of Ireland, you know, you don't get to see enough painting sometimes, you know, in person. And as a painter, if you see it on a computer screen, you're never really going to get the textures. So seeing like all these, like, you know, Manet and Monet and Delacroix and all of them kind of up close, and seeing their brushwork and all of that kind of stuff, was so inspirational. So yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Very good, very good. So what do you do when you're not painting? You're obviously a very hard worker, you know, a real
Yeah, it
grafter.
feels like you know, the art practice kind of becomes your life. But yeah,
Yes.
no, I
You do have another life.
music as well, actually. So that's a kind of pastime that
I think I saw a photograph of you playing an electric guitar, did I?
yeah,
Somewhere.
yeah. No, I played at the exhibition opening in Paris. I had an exhibition in the Irish Culture Centre in Paris in September, and it opened on the Irish Culture Night. So there was like an event for that. So it was myself and Eamon O'Kane had the exhibition, and then my band, which is like an anagram on my own name, and I like to climb. We played a gig then in the courtyard as well for the opening. So yeah, it was a great night actually.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, let's go and have a look at some of your work, because I think it'll be an opportunity to kind of show. Actually, before we do that, can we have just a look around your studio? I know it's not your studio.
Yes.
But at the same time, it'll give us a bit of an impression about where you are and your setup there.
Yeah. So this is where I am. This is like the studio that's facing the street. For anyone who's been here, see a few kind of cars and tractors going by.
Just seen a car go by, yeah.
So this is a painting that I would have made now in residency. So when I'm here, I'm actually responding to this site. And I don't usually paint Irish scenery. Like, as I said earlier, I go back to Sweden. And I know most people who come here to get very, very immersed in depicting the coastline, because it's really spectacular. I mean, you have the sea cliffs and the sea stacks and like, you know, but I just felt that because I identify more with the woodlands, I kind of went inland to the glen that's given name to the centre.
Yes.
Running Glen. And I've been doing walks in the woods there and kind of documenting. This is kind of leading into like a Sitka forest. That's what I'm working on at the moment. So yes, that's a big painting I'm kind of working on right now. And this would be the larch trees on the hill kind of sloping down to the valley. They were just so intensely yellow there a couple of weeks ago before the needles fell. So it was a bit of a challenge to try and capture that really kind of intense yellow. But it was an interesting the kind of thing to try and do something that I don't normally do, which would be to kind of engage with the Irish landscape. But I do feel the landscapes are kind of like something that represents, you know, each person. And I feel very strongly about like the forest landscape kind of represents my inner landscape somehow. And even though like the coastline is really spectacular, I just couldn't bring myself to paint it. It's quite hard to explain sometimes, but it's like a psychological thing. So, so even though I've been down kind of walking along the coast and I've been looking at the sea stack and everything, I just couldn't really paint that for some reason. So when I got into the valley, that's like a couple of miles kind of down a side road, I just felt like a way stronger connection with that kind of landscape. And I went off road a bit, kind of walking in the woods there as well and documenting it. And yeah, that was really interesting.
What we're going to do, Cecilia, is we're going to show some of your work now, and I'll ask you to talk through it.
So yeah, so this piece would have been made in 2017. I was in residency in my old college in Galway in the GMIT CCAM for the summer. So this is a piece I worked on that time, and it was later shown in Futures in the RHA. So as you can see, like I kind of heighten the colors quite a lot in my landscape paintings, but it is based on a real place. So like the rock, I would paint it a little bit more pink, but it is granite. So the granite would be pink anyway. But as you can see as well, you have those kind of drips with the arbitrary colors. So that's something that I'm very interested in, just because I make figurative work. It's a way for me to kind of abstract pieces of it and kind of introduce colors that mightn't be there in the actual landscape, but that I find interesting for myself to explore.
Yeah. Now this is your house, is it?
No, this is this is my studio. So this is
studio.
So this is Engage Studios in Galway, where I've had a studio since 2009, college, and we just moved to a new studio building there a couple of years ago. So this is my new studio since then. So this is actually taken just after the first lockdown finished last year, because I hadn't been able to have access to the studio during that time. So and I'd only been able to work really, really small in notebooks and stuff like that. So when I got back to the studio, I just wanted to work really, really large. So I just bought like a piece of canvas that was 2 by 2 meters. And I kind of made this painting like only for myself originally, because I just kind of needed to express myself somehow through gestural painting again, because I felt that I hadn't been able to do that for a number of weeks. So then like normally I wouldn't paint on unstretched canvas. This is just pinned to the wall, and I stretched it afterwards. But it was only because I didn't really have any particular plans with it when I started. I only kind of painted it for myself. But then when I was quite happy with how it turned out, I just ended up stretching it afterwards. But normally I would build my own stretches from stretcher bars that I order, and you know, stretch it beforehand. Here it had to be kind of the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me, what are the benefits of doing that? I mean, is there a cost benefit, or just allow you to work to the size you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I also when working large, I suppose, like, you know, if you were to order pre-made stretchers of that size, they'd have to be kind of custom made anyway, you know. So and with the stretcher bars, the way I kind of get them made, they're mitered bars, so you just kind of use a mallet and kind of slot them in. So that way, you know, they can be transported quite easily from the makers, but then I can just kind of put them together myself. So that's the way a lot of artists work. If they're working on a large scale, it's just quite easy to kind of put together your own stretchers that way.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
So yeah, that would be the painting in situ in the Kevin Kavanagh Gallery in the August last year.
Yes.
It was an exhibition that was supposed to have taken place at first, like in the spring, but then obviously that couldn't happen, so it was postponed. But it became slightly different, and so that big painting ended up in it. Another work that I made on the residency in Paris was still stuck in Paris at that time, so I had to kind of rethink it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So that was last year.
Okay. And Cecilia, they're not framed, are they?
No, they're not. No, they're just
Would you normally not frame them?
Say again?
Would you normally not frame them like that?
I don't frame them myself. No, if someone wants to do that after they buy them, they can, but I just have them as they are. I kind of enjoy seeing the edges of the canvas as well. You know, as a painter, when I see other people's work, I often kind of inspect the edges, because you can see it's like a history of the painting. You can see the kind of layers they kind of got into the priming, and like, you know, it's quite an interesting history. We're kind of following the edge, and the way I prime my canvas, like I usually stretch unprimed canvas, so then I only prime the front, so the edges will still be raw canvas.
Yes, yes. And I mean, do people who collect your work, would they you know, frame it themselves, or leave it as is?
I think most people leave it as it is.
Really?
Some people possibly frame them. I don't actually know, but I think a lot of time, me personally at least, I really enjoy stretched canvases that are unframed. But I suppose that's a matter of taste.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, this is another piece that was in that exhibition. Yes, as you can see there, I've been using like a colored ground. That's a pink ground that I've been painting on, so that's kind of shining through. And
you can see that. Yeah, you can see that coming through. And are your brush strokes, you know, very thick?
They are in parts. Yeah, if you look at the kind of the lake, like the kind of the icy water, I've been using quite a broad brush, and then I would kind of go in with smaller ones for more detail and stuff like that. But as I kind of work wet on wet with certain sections, you know, it's you're pushing paint around basically until it kind of sits, until it sits right, you know. So it's a number of different brushes, yeah. And this is my studio when I was making work for that exhibition. This would have been autumn 2019. And as you can see there, there's some sculptural works as well. I often work with sculptures too, but I make them out of kind of mundane materials, like stuff that I can work with without needing specific kind of sculpture facilities. So that's a giant hogweed. I would have seen all these hogweeds when I was over in Sweden in summer 19. My mum kept her horse in a friend's field, and it was overrun by hogweeds. So I got really interested in that whole invasive plant and how it's so kind of alien looking. And I'd been reading Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham at the time as well. And then I saw this kind of lake shore that I photographed that also had one of these plants growing slightly smaller. So the way I had these pieces in the gallery was that the hogweed would be standing on, you know, on the floor in the gallery, and it was kind of responding to the smaller hogweed in the paintings. A lot of times my sculptures have a kind of conversation with the paintings in the space.
Yeah, lovely. And what materials would you have used to create that?
So that's dowels that I used a glue gun, and I had these kind of rope. I had rope that was kind of thin and the right color. So it's just, you know, lines of rope that I've kind of glued onto the dowels.
Yeah.
And then it's fabric then that's enforced with steel wire. and then it's matchsticks up top, so it's quite fragile. Like the flower part at the top is matchsticks.
Brilliant, brilliant, yeah. And that's a close-up of that painting.
That's a close-up of the painting, yeah. So that's quite a large piece as well. It's a lake close to where I grew up. So it had always this kind of almost surreal quality. I thought the light was very particular that day, and then the plant there as well. So I liked, like a lot of times when I see a particular scene, I kind of know straight away that I want to paint it. It kind of does something to me when I'm in that space. It can be something about the light or about a particular object or plant or something in the place, in the space that really kind of speaks to me. So a lot of times I kind of know straight away if I'm going to be painting something later.
Yeah. So, and you would have painted that in Ireland, having.
I did, yeah.
So would you have worked to a photograph with that?
It would have been a photograph, yeah. But then I'm kind of abstracting parts, and I'm not looking too closely at the photograph. I usually print them quite small. So yeah, I don't have too much detail to refer to. So it's
okay.
And that's me working on two of the other pieces that are in the show as well. So as you can see there in the pyramid piece, that's actually like I said before, like all these places exist. They can sometimes look quite surreal or strange, but they are real buildings and real objects within the landscape. So that particular strange pyramid is actually a wooden structure that's in a field locally. And like what I can gather, because I would love to ask the people, but I couldn't meet them when I was there. But I'm guessing that it's like a meditation pyramid because it's got a little door and a window on the other side. But there's a beautiful meadow kind of facing the other way, but the window faces straight into the woodland, which means that there is no view basically. So that's why I'm guessing there's some kind of meditation type of pyramid. But yeah, so I thought it was quite striking in the space, and I kind of felt straight away that I wanted to depict it. But you can see this is only kind of half done at this stage. In photographs, so you can see how the kind of underpainting there, the monochrome, is still there in the kind of top half.
Yes. So are we seeing a larger version of that later on, or is
I can't remember.
I know we are of the other one.
But, maybe I'll just move forward. The other one actually, the next one. If you idea. So that's called the Octopus Salt Lick. That was bought by the Arts Council, so it's in the Arts Council collection. And that was also one of these kind of strange things that I came across when I was out walking in the landscape in summer 19. It's a salt lick for deer and moose that the hunters put out. So they just kind of cut off a tree trunk and stick one of these kind of agricultural salt licks on it. And then when the moose and deer come up and lick it, they kind of, they get the salt on their tongue and they lick the bark off the branch then as well. So they just had this kind of weird kind of octopus kind of shape. I thought that was very interesting.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Very strange, yeah.
And this is me in the studio in, I think, May of this year. So that's me working on a couple of paintings that ended up in the Irish Cultural Centre in Paris in the exhibition there. The first one that you can see the straight behind me is called Clearfell, and it's a woodland area that had been cut down. And a lot of times when they cut down a certain section, the hunters straight away build a hunter's blind, because that area is easier to hunt than obviously when there's no trees in the way. So that was a newly built hunter's blind, and I just thought the color of the granite rock and the big kind of rock in the foreground, they were just kind of very kind of alien or strange. And it made me kind of want to depict that as well. So most of the time when I'm painting something, it's because a certain scene strikes me and there's something I want to maybe try and resolve through paint, or there's new colors that I want to kind of, try to handle, or, it's always something that kind of like grabs me about that particular scene for me to want to paint it.
Yes.
And it's a way to kind of try and challenge myself to render something as well.
I remember when we were chatting about forestry, you were talking about how the trees take about 100 years to mature in Sweden, whereas in Ireland it's sort of 10 years or 15 years.
It's very different. I mean,
very, very different.
I found that. I've noticed that whole debate in Ireland at the moment about the Sitka spruce.
Yes.
And I can totally understand that, because when I was walking down in the glen and I walked into one of these forests, I mean, it's so dark. I mean, there's nothing growing. It's just a couple of little pale mushrooms. And it's almost like going into a strange kind of ghostly kind of other world. Whereas when you walk in the forests of Sweden, where around my family farm and stuff, it'd be more, the trees take maybe 100 years to mature, because they would grow slower because the climate is colder in the winter, and it'd be more kind of, they thin the trees over time as well, which means that it's not as dense. And there's usually a kind of like a bit of a mix of pine and spruce and stuff like that. So it's easier to kind of walk in, and then they fell kind of pockets of it and replant within it. So there's forests of different ages kind of all around there.
Yeah, so you get more growth on the ground than you would.
Yeah, exactly.
More densely planted forest.
Exactly, and it's much easier to walk in. I mean, there would be certain areas where they would have more like those kind of plantations of kind of more like rows of trees like that. But the more kind of properly maintained forests would be more kind of, you know, the trees are growing in kind of random spots and they're kind of thinned over time and stuff like that, and instead of just rows.
Yeah, since you're so interested in forest, isn't there some move towards planting more native varieties of trees?
There is in Ireland, yeah, absolutely. And in the Aina Valley, for example, in Connemara, there's a group of artists and cultural workers who are kind of working on that at the moment. Yeah, they're basically kind of trying to replace Sitka spruce with native varieties. And I've heard of a few other projects like that around the country as well. So I mean, that's very welcome. And I mean, even somewhere like Sweden, like the spruce isn't a native tree even to most parts of Sweden. It's also something that would have come in after the Ice Age. So the pine is the actual native species.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is really interesting. I love this.
So yeah, this is a Latchuk rug that I was working on like earlier this year. It was basically to do with, you know, that whole thing of you know, with COVID and everything, the way you have to constantly like mind what you're touching, and you know, this kind of thing of like I was missing a kind of tactile touch. So during the lockdown in the spring, I was in this fabric shop and they did this like really chunky yarn, and even just handling it because it was so soft and like so nice and tactile. So I just kind of wanted to make something out of it. So I got this weld mesh in a DIY shop. And I got a latch hook. So it's basically like latch hook rug making, but with really, really thick yarn and a very kind of wide mesh. So I was working on that for a few weeks because it's, you know, it's quite labor intensive, even though it's thick yarn because it's 2 by 2 meters almost. But yeah, it's kind of sheets of steel metal, like 6 of them side by side that make up that rug. So it's not actually a rug, it's actually on steel mesh, but yeah, it was something I really enjoyed working with. And I'm going to
weight, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm going to continue working with the tapestry next now as well, to try and work more with the punch rug tapestry and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there it is in situ at the exhibition in Paris, is that right?
Yeah, so that's the Irish Cultural Centre in Paris. So it was myself and Eamon O'Kane. So half of the room was my work and the other half was his work. So depending what direction you were looking, you could get almost like 2 separate shows, but they also tied together by dealing with landscape and buildings and objects within the landscape and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it was a nice thing to be invited to show there, especially after having done the residency and really loving the place so much, and getting to come back for a week to install the show and do the gig and everything was really fun. And that's too, I think, because that's the pyramid actually that was in Kevin Kavanagh last year as well. Yeah. Also in the Paris show. And that other painting beside it is a piece that I made on residency in Paris. That was in the show as well. And this is a piece I was making over the course of the summer. It's a huge rock that was just left after the ice age. So it's called After the Ice. There's all these kind of big boulders, glacial rocks everywhere in the woods in Sweden. And they have this kind of smoothness because the ice cover would have kind of glided across it. I just kind of really enjoyed kind of tackling that surface, because it's you know, normally you try to compose a picture and you mightn't necessarily pick an object that fills up almost the entire scene, but I thought that was an interesting challenge to make the rock that important that it just became the whole painting, you know.
Yes.
And this is another piece that was made over the summer. These pieces are actually on show currently in an exhibition I have done in the gallery at the Burren College of Art in Ballyvaughan in County Clare. So that's on actually till it closes next Friday, the 26th. If anyone is about, it's open Monday to Friday. So that's a path that goes between 2 farms. And it's got these kind of snow sticks. Like usually they have those sticks and they stick them down beside regular roads just as the snow plows and the cars will see where the road edge is when the snow falls. But someone had used these sticks just to mark the path for the same reasons through the woods. And I always love when I see these kind of man-made things within the woods, because it kind of breaks up the kind of natural scene in interesting ways for me. So yeah, so this is just a picture from the current exhibition at the Burren College. It's a large gallery space, so there's a number of large paintings, and then I have these fabric sculptures as well within the space. So these plants in the middle of the room, they're made from fabric, but they have a kind of like a stabilizing steel wire in the center.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of inspired by kind of wetland plants and stuff like that that I've seen in the woods in Sweden, but kind of blown up in size. And if we go to the next one, this is one of the paintings I would have made over the past few months as well. This is made in the summer as well. It's a winter scene, and I painted this on a purple background, so I kind of heightened the purple color within it. And a lot of times when I'm kind of working with a painting, I'm kind of very inspired by the way a photograph might render the color slightly different as well compared to real life. So
yes,
sometimes depending on the settings on the camera, the shadows can look more purple, or things like that. So I often go with those kind of things when I'm painting then as well.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's beautiful color. Beautiful color. Yeah.
So, and this is another piece in the current exhibition. So these are the snow sticks that I've made out of fabric and branches I've sewn as well. So they're all kind of natural size, but they're really floppy, and like they're almost like cuddly toys. Like you can kind of cuddle them, as opposed to being finding them sharp like you would with normal branches and stuff like that. And I was looking at the whole idea of the utility of objects. If you have, the only reason you would make a snow stick is just to like mark a path, and it needs to be really rigid. Yeah. And when I made these kind of floppy life-size renderings of the snow sticks, I'm kind of playing with that whole idea of like, if they're really floppy and they can't stand up and they can't really do anything, what's the point? Is it still a snow stick then, or what is it? And I just I like the idea of kind of faking in nature, or making like fake renderings of real things that look kind of almost like theater props. Like they look kind of semi-real, but then when you go up close, you notice that there's something off about them. Like they might be soft when they're supposed to be hard, or they have other qualities that aren't inherent in the real object that I'm copying.
Yeah. And tell me the significance of the circle.
Yeah, so the circle, and that's a blanket that's it's stem stitch. So that took quite a while. It's basically Rutherford's atomic model. So that was like the model of the atom in the early 20th century, before it was replaced by the more kind of circular, the circles you would have probably seen in school. But this became the kind of emblem for atomic power then instead. So there's been so much debate recently about climate change and about atomic power and whether it's good or bad, and also the fact that everything is made up of atoms, and this emblem of this Rutherford model would have been just a model of the atom, not of atomic power, because it wasn't invented at the time. So so I was just kind of like very interested in all these kind of things as well. And then looking at someone like, say, Hilma af Klint, who made paintings that were very abstract in the early 20th century. They were also inspired by the atom, but at the time they hadn't split the atom yet. So she would have had a very different perception of that. So yeah, I was kind of looking at all these things at the time as well. And this is the exhibition opening. Myself and Kevin Kavanagh gave a talk at the opening. It was on the 28th of October. So it was really great, actually. It was a great turnout, and a really, really nice evening. Actually, it was nice to have a proper opening again,
Absolutely, yeah.
After all this time. So yeah, so it was really nice, actually. So yeah, so we gave a talk, and it was also the launch of a book on my work that Kevin Kavanagh has just published. So we were launching that too.
Yeah, and you can get that book on your website or in the
on
gallery.
My website, right? Yeah, just to plug it a little bit. This is the book.
Off you go.
So yeah,
do you have a copy of it there, do you?
What's that?
Do you have a copy of it there?
Yeah, I have it here. Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop sharing then.
Cool. So yeah, so this is the book here, and it's a hardcover book. So it's just kind of covering the last 4 years of my practice.
Yep.
So those paintings you would have seen in the slideshow, and other work as well. And it's got an essay by Christine Leach that contextualizes my work really nicely. So you can get it from Kevin Kavanagh Gallery. It's going to be in the Dublin Art Book Fair on the 25th till the 5th. And you can get it from my website as well, ceciliadanell.com.
Yeah.
I'll get it through PayPal there if you're interested.
I'll put a link at the bottom of this on the video. So people can be directed to that. Okay. That's wonderful. It's wonderful to see your work, you know.
Thanks.
And, I must say it's very beautiful, very impressive, very powerful.
Thanks very much.
Work. Yeah. Tell me what advice would you give to people starting out? I mean, I know you're young and all that, but you know, the whole art world has changed so much. Is there anything in particular you would advise people setting out in a career?
I think you know, a thing that I always did even from day one is just, you know, you have to really put in the hours, I suppose. That's one thing, you know, because I would always have been very dedicated to my practice, dedicated to developing, to researching things, reading a lot, like all that kind of stuff. So one aspect would be obviously to have like a sustained practice where you really dedicate yourself and your time. But I suppose then as well, you know, if you only work away in your own solitude and no one gets to see your work, then, you know, you have to somewhat kind of get it out there as well. So that's why I suppose, you know, applying for things and being quite strategic about trying to kind of like start small. Like I would have started small, say in Galway after college, and tried to kind of network locally and take part in group exhibitions and, you know, get my work seen in different ways. And then, you know, from that, then I kind of managed to branch out and applied for different awards and things like that. And but all the time, I suppose it's always been a case of just really kind of sustaining a practice, you know, to keep at it, basically. Yeah.
And tell me, does social media play a role in the promotion of your work?
It does nowadays. Yeah, I suppose when I first started out, it wouldn't really have been a thing yet. No. You know, I always had a website though. I remember even when I was in college, I like bought a book on how to code a website, and I coded it from scratch. Yeah. So I always kind of wanted to kind of get my work seen in different ways. So I suppose, you know, previously it was the website, but then in the past maybe 10 years or so, it's been, you know, social media as well. So I suppose I try to kind of keep a presence on social media and kind of update what I'm doing and stuff like that, which I think people appreciate as well, because it's quite nice. Especially on stuff like Instagram and things like that, to actually get a view into people's studios and kind of see, you know, the work as it happens and stuff like that. I think that's.
I always ask the guest artists what work they'd love to hang on their own walls at home, and it could be anything. You know, it could be in a museum or private collection. Let's assume you could just grab it and then it's yours. What would you choose?
I mean, there's so many different artists, but I really love Robert Armstrong's work. Mm-hmm. So I picked a piece by him. It's called A Cloud for Sigiriya. That's the piece there. Yeah, and I really love his work. But I mean, there's so many great painters working away in Ireland at the moment. You know, Sinead Newayne, Diana Copper-White, Kathy Tynan. You know, there's too many to mention even. So I mean, I feel sometimes personally that, like, Ireland has a great bunch of artists working currently, but sometimes people from other parts of the world maybe don't know about it, you know, that kind of way. So so suppose I feel personally that, like, you know, Ireland has as, you know, strong a stable of artists as any other country would currently. I think, you know, the visual arts are very strong in Ireland at the moment, but I think sometimes by people in other countries, I think Ireland becomes more about, you know, music and heritage and stuff like that, when the visual art doesn't always get seen. So I hope that, you know, there'll be a change in that too.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think it's very important that we have that sort of outward looking perspective, you know, as part of your practice. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the floor if anyone would like to ask a question. So I'm going to allow yourselves to unmute.
I just see someone here has asked a question.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't looking at that. Chat.
Catherine Gagan, what medium do you use to create acrylic drips? Yeah. So I just use like Galleria acrylics, because I don't need like thick impasto acrylics anyways. I just kind of buy, you know, the student version. But then I put in like matte medium. And I put in, I just see what it's called actually. It's flow release. So by putting in flow release, it kind of breaks up the acrylic to make it so you don't get big lumps in it and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I put in like matte medium and a little bit of water. So I have to kind of like be very careful with the, like, how fluid I make it, you know. So I know over time you kind of learn how much a medium or how much water to put in. But I can kind of control the drips to a certain extent. So like I might extend some of it more or less. But that kind of makes it possible for me to get it to drip without running altogether, you know.
Very good. Do you always work on a wall or flat?
I always
at an
hang the
angle?
paintings on a wall. Yeah. I know there's an easel in the background here, but it's not my easel. I never use an easel actually.
I see. Niamh says, Niamh O'Connor, beautiful work. I admire use of form and color. Catherine, you've answered that question. Jane German says, love the textile piece, fascinating technique using weld and mesh.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
Hello, Alan, may I come in?
You can. Just let me read some of these things first. Maliki says, lovely work, unique colored views. Niamh, bucket list destinations. Is it here any location you would love to visit and paint? Where in the world? So is there anywhere in the world that you particularly love to go to paint?
Yeah, I'd love to go actually to either like, you know, the Pacific Northwest in the States, or to Canada or somewhere like that.
Yes.
I really love to go somewhere where there's like, you know, big mountains and forests and stuff like that. That'd be kind of bucket list, definitely.
Very good. And Derek says, fountain of knowledge, old soul in young genius.
Oh, thank you.
Now, sorry, who did I rudely interrupt there?
It was me, Paul McCormack. Hello, Cecilia.
Oh, hiya, Paul.
How are you?
Yeah, I saw your show in the Ashford all those years ago. It was great. I have two questions, one technical and the other sort of more to do with admin. One, you say you pride your own canvases. Do you use rabbit skin size, or what do you do? Just do you use ready-made acrylic gesso, or what?
I actually use, it's actually funny, I don't know if you know painter Blaise Drummond. He was my lecturer in college, and he actually recommended me to buy this. It's actually a wall paint. It's a primer sealer undercoat by Color Trend. And it's a really amazing medium because it's not like regular wall paint that it kind of flakes or anything like that. It's really kind of like malleable. So I just prime my canvases. I get raw canvas and I prime them with the Color Trend primer sealer undercoat.
Give me that again. Color Trend, which is the brand. I've heard of that. Primary sealer undercoat.
It's called primer sealer undercoat. It's a grey bucket with kind of like a kind of lime green text on it. There's only some paint shops that have it. But it's an amazing medium because it's got this kind of extender, is probably some kind of glue base or something in it as well. So it's not like, you know, if you prime a canvas with regular wall painting, you poke it would crack.
Oh, absolutely.
But this is like amazingly malleable. So it's something that he recommended to me, like when I was still in college, and I still use it. But if I'm somewhere else, like then I've been on residencies outside of Ireland because the Color Trend is an Irish brand, and I haven't been able to find anything as good. So then I would just get like regular gesso or something to prime. But here in Ireland I use the Color Trend. It's really good.
Right, okay, yeah, because the regular gesso can crack. Now my other question was, I'm curious about your time in the Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris. I was just wondering, in your application, did you put in, I'm just going to generally immerse myself in Paris, or was it had you a specific plan in mind?
Yeah, so I was going to always work with my previous subject matter, which was research I'd done over in Sweden. So I wasn't going to respond to the Paris location through paint. But what I did put into the application was that I wanted to look at loads of art in different collections and stuff. And I made the application mainly about wanting to kind of like learn from seeing a lot of work, which I did, which was incredibly inspirational, and just like looking at all these kind of paint applications up close by the great masters and stuff. So that was what I put in. But I know other people that got it, who would have, say, like identified a particular collection they wanted to research, or a particular, you know, there's so many other museums about different subject matter that might fit with some people's work, and they can put that in. So yeah, so my recommendation would be to kind of find something that makes it necessary to kind of go to Paris to pursue whatever you're doing, but the work itself doesn't need to be depicted in location or anything like that.
Well, thanks, Cecilia.
No worries.
What plans have you got? What sort of ambitions have you got now from here on in?
All right,
anything specific?
So yeah, well, in the immediate future, I'm showing in the Hennessy Craig Award exhibition in the RHA in what is it, in February? So that's like an award for young painters. They've been shortlisted through the RHA annual exhibitions. There'll be 10 painters in it. So I'll be in that in the spring. And then I've just gotten an agility award from the Arts Council to research tapestry. So I'm going to be working with kind of rug making and tapestry for the next few months. So that's the thing that I've always kind of wanted to immerse myself in more for the last couple of years, but because of costs involved and stuff like that, I'm really, really delighted to be able to actually pursue that now for a while. And then I have an exhibition in the Kevin Kavanagh Gallery in October next year. So that will be what I'll be working towards, like, you know, in the coming months. But then after that, I don't actually know. We'll see what happens. But yeah.
Very good. Okay. All right. Listen, we leave it there. Cecilia, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah,
great. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did.
It was a fascinating insight into your practice and your work, and just you as a person. And I wish you all the very, very best for the future.
No, thanks so much.
Not at all. And to everyone else out there, thank you very much for watching. We appreciate you giving your time to us, and look forward to seeing you next week. Next week, we'll have the artist Gowan Dunn. Some of you may know him. A lot of you might know him. And so he's on. And we've got another 4 people, I think, already penned in for the next couple of Saturdays running up to Christmas. We look forward to that next week. And I'm sure you'll tune in and say hello to him. And we'll see you all then. So thanks again, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.